several sessions before. I know how inspiring it is to be among such fellow industry leaders, founders, investors that are leading the way. So it really is an honor to be sharing a bit more about my background, but also about the problem that we've identified in the scale-up world that we're trying to solve. But just before I jump into that, quick background on myself. I come from the world of marketing and advertising, having been a business and brand creative strategist for the better part of my career. I had the chance to lead global strategy for many of the world's largest corporations. And on a few different occasions, I got to identify opportunities and problems for which the businesses I worked with could solve through digital products, or in other words, going beyond the traditional communications campaigns, which agencies usually deliver to clients. So I created two corporate ventures back in the day, one back in Brazil within Vivo Telecom, one of the biggest telecom companies in Latin America, which is today the Brazilian equivalent to Headspace and has over 5 million active users. And another one within Mars Pet Care called Nose ID. This was the world's first AI-based dog tracker to help owners identify the 9 million dogs getting lost in the United States and never returning home. But basically now I'm looking to solve another problem and one that is to be solved in scale as well. So I'm now the co-founder at UJJI, which is basically the learning and development software as a service platform for scale-ups. I'll talk about that in a bit, but essentially, I love this quote from Eric Rice. It talks about the fact that startups don't starve, they drown. I'm sure you're all familiar with it, but basically, it's tapping into the fact that we don't just fail because we end up failing because of a lack of cash to continue all growing, but we also fail because there's a lack of focus in the business. So much so that we end up not executing our plans in the way that will help us move forward to our next stages of growth. And this is directly tied to your team in the startup. So exactly what Ollie was saying here, you know how much the team is fundamental to taking a startup to success, right? Like, I mean, many investors even say this is the main thing they care about when investing in the business. Some even say they don't even care about the idea. They want to back strong teams. And even if it's not up there, it'll always be amongst at least the three most important factors. Well, it could be like product, market, and team, perhaps. And the good thing is that in this country alone, 36,000 startups are born each year. This is UK Gov data. Now, on the other hand, the bad news is that we are seeing 82% of them dying, specifically because these teams don't have the capabilities required to scale. You know this better than I do, but many are exceptional founders, technical founders who build amazing products, but they just simply do not yet have or the capabilities to build and grow a business. And many times when they do have those capabilities, they just cannot do it alone, right? They'll need to build a team around them. And most of those times, these people that join the business have not scaled the business before. And then as you grow the team, you're bringing more and more people that simply do not have those skills to take the business to its next stages of growth. But you might be thinking, okay, cool, Rafa, we know the importance of training and learning and development for business. Can't we just look at this later? Basically, training and learning and development in the scale-up world, as you know, has up until now been kicked down the road. Let's just power through, and when we get there, we'll think about learning and development for our teams, right? Wrong. This is exactly the mentality that we've seen up until today, and it's exactly what's been leading so many scale-ups to fail. And I've been there, so has Ludmila, my co-founder. We've both felt this pain before, and this is exactly the one we're trying to solve. So in this year alone, I've spoken to over 50 founders, and they all mentioned the same thing. They're all talking about how swamped they are. Isn't that crazy? I mean, it's no new news. We're all extremely stretched out. But obviously, we do know the impacts of not training our teams. However, we're usually used to thinking about the impact that this has on our businesses, medium to long term. We all know how tough it'll be to keep people productive, especially when we're in a startup or scale up with no time, when we have limited budgets, when there's little knowledge to train our teams. We all know how it'll be difficult to keep our teams engaged and aligned with our company vision, especially more in this remote and hybrid world that we're in today. And we know as well how we might lose some great talent along the way, right? Because of lack of career development and support. This even impacts our bottom lines, but still, these medium to long term impacts are not enough for scale up in, teams and leaders and founders to start building a culture of learning and development and of training early on. It's never been, to be honest. But we have basically discovered that there are more immediate short term impacts of not training our teams, which is today influencing the potential of many amazing startups and scale ups out there that I see and that I speak to on a regular basis. Because you know this, we're all spinning plates. We're always stretched out. We're often spreading ourselves too thin. And this is leading founders to many times micromanage, right? Like they're dipping in and out of work streams because they simply don't trust that their teams will be leading their fronts. And this basically keeps them from focusing on what will truly get the business to scale, because they also have their work to do, right? Like they like myself, I have my own stuff to do. And then if I keep on micromanaging and getting into like the bits and bobs of everyone else's work, I'm just missing out on the opportunity to focus on what it is that will take my business to scale, being it the commercial side of things, like actual new business development, being it fundraising, being it networking, and just getting UJJI under the radar of important people that can unlock important opportunities. So basically, scale ups are turning a blind eye to training, not because they're too busy. This is what we've identified here. They're basically doing this because up until now, there wasn't a solution that would cater to scale ups in particular. So the learning management systems, the L&D platforms out there, they're all chasing enterprise and big corporates, right? Like each and every corporate has their very own learning and development solution in place. However, they can afford that, right? Like they have these solutions, they have very high subscription fees. They limit it to a minimum of 100 employees, sometimes even 500 employees. So immediately, if you're a startup or a scale up, you're ruled out. And they also have like these long lockup plans starting at 1 year, but sometimes even like 3 year contract. Many don't even know, many startups and scale ups don't even know if they're going to be around in 3 years' time, right? So this just doesn't work for startups and scale ups. So basically, we've come up with a solution, which is the only scale up specific learning and development platform, equipping teams in these fast paced work environments with the skills these businesses require to scale. So everything from the soft skills, or how we call them here at UJJI, basically the behavioral skills, such as productivity, problem solving, leadership, communication, and adaptability, all the way through to the hard skills, the technical skills around sales and lead generation, customer support and success, social marketing, product management, ops and admin, and more. And off the back of the team's engagement with the platform, Wuchi basically provides real-time data and insights on the strengths and the skill gaps of their teams. But beyond that, we also tap into everything that has to do with people's biases. So what actually is keeping them from moving forward in their career, and their heuristics, what they can actually double down on in order to really accelerate their performance. Because we here at UJJI believe that rarely it's just the professional development elements that are keeping you from moving forward. It's just down to your behavior sometimes. It's your personality. It's what makes you unique. So putting you in touch with that can be make or break for you as a professional to unlock your ultimate performance. And that's why we have basically built this methodology within Oxford and have validated with neuroscientists there. Everything we do is backed by behavioral sciences, and I'll talk about this in a bit. But before I do talk about that, I just wanted to also touch on how we've made this affordable and accessible to startups and to scale-ups. Basically, we've made it fit into scale-ups cash flow. So I'm not showing our plans here to try and sell anything. It's just so that you can actually understand how it actually becomes a bit of a no-brainer for you to actually start training your teams from the very early days of the business. So for the price of a cup of coffee per head, you can now get your teams up and running on UJI. No more minimum number of seats, no lengthy contracts, no expensive subscriptions. This is how we're disrupting the industry here. But just so you understand a bit more about the product per se, how are we making this possible? How can we make it affordable for startups? So you know how software as a service actually becomes scalable, and through scalability, you actually make it ultimately affordable for businesses to jump in on it, right? So essentially, UJI is a software as a service solution within the world of learning and development, and it's benefiting from scale economy, obviously. So we're giving scale-ups an easy, fun, and affordable way to create their own culture of training and learning and development. Basically, it comprises of our mobile app where the learning experience takes place. We like to even say it's kind of like Duolingo, but for workplace training. Then there's also the behavioral insights dashboard where employers keep a finger in the pulse of what makes their teams tick. There's even a bespoke authoring tool, which you can plug in specific training and content directly to our gamified methodology. So essentially, you go in on the admin panel, you just essentially choose what it is that you want to upload, and immediately it's sent directly to your people's app. And then there's the Slack and the Microsoft Teams integration, so teams can upskill together regardless of where they're at around the world. So if we don't learn through osmosis anymore today, because we're not in the office, it's time we start using tech in the scale-up world to train our teams, because this is already being used in the corporate world. Why is 2/3 of the UK population being left out of this? Like, this is what we're trying to do here. Democratize access to upskilling. Even Rishi Sunak has mentioned this is a major problem in the UK. So we have to solve this. Essentially, you might still be thinking, okay, cool, this is an awesome learning and development platform. What makes it so different from all the other ones? Why can't we just bring in another learning and development platform that's already working in the corporate world now onto the scale-up world? There are several reasons for this, but essentially, those have not been developed initially for the scale-up world, so the content doesn't work here. Obviously, startups and scale-ups do not have processes as corporates do. You're not learning how to follow processes in the startup world. You're learning how to learn at the end of the day. So it's all about a lifelong learning approach in which you learn, you gather insights, you put it in practice. So what we've developed here goes through our behavioral sciences and behavioral economics approach to make learning and development sticky. So essentially, it really does keep making people come back for more. And this is why we have such high adoption and retention rates when compared to the industry. If you start to think, when you have a learning and development solution, you subscribe that to, let's say, 100 employees, 12 to 13 will start using it. After 90 days, that falls to 2.5%. It's just ridiculous. Here at UJI, our numbers are a lot higher than that. And it's exactly because we have created this as a solution to really weave into people's routine and to really piggyback on the devices and the tools that we use every day so that training doesn't feel like another work task added to our plate. So in everything we do, from the learning and the content all the way through to the UX and the UI and the behavioral insights dashboard, we're always pulling the strings around what makes people tick. Okay. I'm sorry, I'm talking a lot here. I don't want this to be like a one-way session. So if anyone has a question, please just interrupt me. I just can't see you all because I have my screen on and I'm sharing. But if you do have a question, please just stop me at any time. Okay. Cool. So essentially, we're basically making training feel less like work and more like play. So think of it with me. As soon as you get a web browser-based learning and development solution, what comes to mind? Work, right? Like, it immediately puts you off. hence the low adoption and retention levels in the industry. And that's why we've made this work for the startup and the scale up world, because we are drowning, like Eric Rice says. So we have to actually learn in a way that is not adding any more to our plate. So that's why the learning experience takes place on an app, first and foremost, so that we can now improve our networking skills whilst we're on our commute, or train our digital communications in our coffee break, learn how to build a CRM pipeline whilst watching TV, or even listen to tips for like objection handling whilst we're walking our dog. It's all about weaving into people's routine and piggybacking on the tools and the devices we use every day at work, so that training doesn't feel like another work task added to our plate. This is exactly what we're trying to do here. So just to wrap things up, before we can move on to questions and a bit more of a discussion, because I'd love to hear your thoughts and talk a bit more about why you think training and learning and development has not been a thing in the startup world and the scale up world up until now. I'd love to discuss with you as well, like, how do we solve this imbalance? Because obviously we have our own tactics for that, but I'd love to bounce that off you and see what are your thoughts, how you see this actually being solved in the scale up world, because it is a problem and we are here to solve it. But essentially, beyond the very high adoption and retention rates compared to industry benchmarks, we've already been seeing some awesome response from our users. So 63% actually see a real life impact in their careers after only 5 UJ sessions. 85% want to continue using UJ in their day-to-day lives. So it really is a testament to the gamification, to the behavioral economics approach, and all of that good stuff. And really, this is just the start. We're already working with many of what we consider to be UK's most innovative tech startups and scale-ups, work communities, and so forth. And we'll basically start our scaling journey now by contributing to like partner networks, basically continuing to partner up with players such as the ones that we have here on the left-hand side. We're basically getting close to co-working spaces, HR and recruitment firms, employer branding agencies. But also one thing that we're exploring now, which is one of the things that I wanted to discuss with you, is actually using VCs, accelerators, and incubators to offer UJI as a perk alongside AWS credits, Zendesk discounts, Airtable vouchers, etc. Because we believe that if it's been not a thing up until now, it's up to like the investors as well to play a role in actually helping de-risk their investments by making their team stronger. So we're basically making training and learning and development even more accessible to startups and scale-ups through this go-to-market strategy. So obviously, if you want to learn more about how this works, just let me know, give me a shout. And hopefully it will work for us delivering against our vision of equipping hyper-growth businesses with the capabilities to scale, so that the transformational tech that is born around us can actually make the impact they've been brought to life to make. So this is our vision here at UJI, and obviously always keen to share a bit more, talk about it at another session. But yeah, just wanted to throw this out there, see what are your thoughts, and make this a bit less of a one-way discussion. Just get us all to bring our minds together and talk about the problem that we've identified, the fact that we're all spinning plates in the scale-up world. Leaders end up micromanaging because they don't trust their teams to lead their work streams. And so this is hindering the performance and the potential of all these amazing startups.
Rafi, thank you very much for that. You've raised some very important pertinent points this morning. I'd love to hear from our community on any experience or anything that you know, any ideas or thoughts on this. It'd be very, very interesting. Gary, you've normally got something to offer up.
Yeah, I normally do. Rafael, just looking at that, and I know the figures are really good for the percentages of users going forward, but one of the first things with payment per employee is if employees don't use it, then you're virtually doubling up the cost. Because even though you had like 50% retention, there's going to be 50% of the people you're paying for going forward. Is that a problem going forward for yourself? Another thing is who's your customer? Is it the person who needs the training done, or is it the actual employee?
That's a great question. So on the retention, obviously, this is a massive problem in the industry as a whole, right? So the fact that like these corporates, for example, are paying for 100 employees, and after 90 days, only 2 or 3 are still using it. I think this is an actual problem. The thing is, in the corporate world, there's L&D budgets set aside, and they have to be spent, or else they'll like they'll be going down the drain. No one will use it, and it will just like die. In the scale up world, obviously not, because you can use that money for something else. If you have not put that aside, obviously, like, why even think about training your teams, right? So what we do here is guarantee that this is moving the needle, and we make sure that the leaders and the decision makers in the business are actually playing a role in getting the people to use this more and more. And that's why we do everything we can to piggyback on the routine, on the devices that we use every day. So like the Slack and the Microsoft Teams experience, it's there to actually even create some FOMO within the company. Like if you're not playing the specific quizzes and the cool experiences that are showing up for you, you're actually at the end of the day just missing out on something quite cool that is going on in your company. And so our idea is to, even after 90 days, if we have reached like this 52%, which is the lowest that we've achieved across any of our clients, that we continue to bring people in, and then we continue to involve the decision makers so that they continue to play a role in bringing these people back in. So for example, the company leaderboard is that is quite cool to help with this. So we have a customer, Fluid. They're a big project management tool out there. They have like employees across the world. So very hard to keep that engagement going, right? Like there just isn't that sort of like two-way approach between employees because we're just not there in a physical space anymore. Jared, the CEO, he always sends the company leaderboard on a Friday to say, this is where our company is at. Congratulations to the top 3, et cetera, et cetera. And so it just keeps people wanting to come back for more. Another thing that is quite interesting is that once we start developing specific training for these businesses as they scale and grow, people have to come back to the app. Because let's say there's a company announcement from Jared, your CEO. Will you not go and check that out? Like if you're not doing that, you really do not care about your business anymore. So the idea is for this to actually never become something that is a burden for you cost-wise, that you're actually getting the bang for the buck. And now on to your second question. Essentially, our main decision maker, or the people we reach out to when selling UJJI, is the people that suffer the pain the most, which at this point are the leaders in scale ups, because they're the ones that are stretched out even more than anyone else. So if we're telling them that we're giving them the gift of time by training their teams to lead their work stream so that they can just focus on what is important for them, then chances are that they'll want to really start creating a culture of learning and development from the very early days of the business. So we started with our low-hanging fruit, which are like startups, really. So like 30 to 70 employee startup, for example, like Series A, I would say. And now we're moving on to the world of scale-ups. So we just brought in our first over 100 employee company last week, 120 employees. So the more we move into like the scale-up space, the more we make an impact in scale. So that's our plan. Really getting all the startups and the scale-ups to see that this is the only learning and development solution that's been created for their teams. So I always like to say it's almost like YC school, but in a way that is fun, that is structured, that you have all the content that you need, and that you can actually acquire the skills that you need without having to like go through the scattered content across the web.
Thanks, Gary. Nargis.
Hello, thank you, Rafael. That was a really great presentation. And yeah, useful points. I'm going to try and keep my questions short because I'm losing my voice. So yeah, I'll try and hold up. Yeah, great points, because I completely agree with you. Spinning plates. There are a lot of nodding heads on the screen I saw as you were mentioning that. So that's something we all kind of share in our day-to-day life. And obviously the asset that your team brings. Anyone that doesn't think, you know, startup is all about your team, right? So completely with you. 2 questions for you. Can you tell us about like the traction of the platform, just in terms of, you know, how it's been received? And the reason I ask that is I just wonder about the re-education kind of piece, just because I know you're dealing with sort of scale ups, so they're a little bit further along than like early stage. But I just wanted to get your thoughts about priority, because listening to you speak, I'm in agreement that it's definitely an important thing for founders to think about. And, you know, from the looks of the platform, it's done in a very sort of creative, fun way and an engaging way. But I just wonder, in that list of priorities, where does it sit, and how difficult is it for people to kind of really not just think about it and agree with you, but go to the next stage kind of thing?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it really you touched on a good point, which is re-education, because it really is a completely new setup, a completely new mindset that you need to install, particularly in the early stages, right? Like when you're closer to the later stages, like chances are you already have if not a full-time head of people, like a fractional HR professional that is helping you out and really putting the building blocks in place so that you can scale the business effectively. The earlier stage is really a matter of communicating this real deep pain that all founders and leaders are suffering. Like, we're all stretched out. We're working through the nights. It really is super, super tough. And at the end of the day, what we've been seeing is that the way we actually get these teams to buy into the idea is by really bringing down the barrier of entry. So it is super, super affordable. Like, if you have, let's say, 15 people on your team, I'll do some quick maths here. For a quarter, it's £6.99 per employee per month for 3 months. And if you have 15 people on your team, you're going to spend 315 quid. So why not give it a go? See if there's an element of change. Keep track of the data that you are measuring on your strengths and the skill gaps. If it doesn't work, you don't renew it, but it's just 315 quid, you know? So it really is showing and getting these people by the hand that they can actually start making a difference in their business as they scale, without having to think about this further down the line. But it really is a re-education piece, and that's why we have so much of a thought leadership in place. What we like to say is that we're kind of following the Seed Legals playbook here. So you are obviously familiar with Seed Legals. Legals for startups was something that wasn't a thing back in the day. Like, if you stop to think, you'd either not do it, and then you'd be like completely in a completely bad place further down the line, or you'd waste all your funds that you've just raised in legals. So what we're doing is exactly the same, but for learning and development in the scale-up world. So being ubiquitous across all the startup touch points, being it digitally or physically, even trade shows and all of that, with actual content marketing and thought leadership to really drive that re-education.
Great question, August. Thank you very much for that.